Good evening, everyone. My name is David Freese. I'm the mayor of Tonganoxie. I'm calling to order this November 18th, 2024 City of Tonganoxie City Council meeting. Ms. Huntington, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Partridge?
Here.
Ms. McCutcheon's absent. Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Donnelly?
Here.
Mr. Dale?
I am here.
Would you join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is item 2, approval of minutes. Review of the minutes from the regular meeting dated October 21, which is the last time we met. Anybody have any corrections or remarks about the minutes? If not, I would accept a motion to approve.
Motion to approve is presented.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 3 on our agenda tonight is the consent agenda, in which we review bill payments from the previous period. Does anybody have any question about the bill payments recorded in the packet? Seeing none, I'd accept a motion to approve.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We have nothing listed under old business tonight. Mr. Porter, did anyone sign up to speak to us tonight?
No signups, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Onward to new business. Item A, are we considering A and B together, or I guess they just need to be, they just happen to be together, right?
They'll require separate motions, but we could give a staff report that combine the two items for your
Okay.
reference.
That'd be great. Consider
I will recuse myself on both, even though I'm not involved in it in any way, shape, or form. I will feel better if I
That's right.
get involved.
Thank you. Consider acceptance of public dedications of a replat for Stone Creek Edition number 12 and 13. Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mayor. The agenda packet includes detailed staff reports for both of the next two items, which are both replats of elements of either Stone Creek number 10 edition or number 10 and number 11 in the case of the edition number 13 item. They're titled as new additions at the request of the county planning and zoning and engineering staff that review certain aspects of final plats for consistency across the county and different communities. We also, I want to recognize that Ben Gasper with SMH Consultants Engineering is here tonight, and he would be happy to address any questions you have, I'm sure. And you'll probably be familiar with him from previous applications for this item. There were two items, again, referenced here, and I'll go through them in a little bit of detail. Stone Creek Edition number 12 is an adjustment that came about close to the completion of public infrastructure for part of Stone Creek number 10. The lots depicted in the application and the plat materials required a public utility easement in an area that previously wasn't anticipated earlier in the project at the behest of the local electric utility, Free State Electrical Co-op, who requested that poles be situated on one side of a retaining wall instead of the other. And so the assumption made earlier in what side of the wall the utility easement covered wasn't accurate to what they requested. So that's a fairly simple request. It does impact a series of lots in the rear yard, but it doesn't negatively impact rear yard setbacks from the building area or the nearest intrusion of the easement into those parcels. So staff have no concerns, and you'll note that in our staff report summary recommendations. The Planning Commission did approve this item unanimously at their earlier meeting earlier in November, so there were no negative comments or concerns about that item from that group either. The next item, Stone Creek Edition number 13, impacts portions of both Edition number 10 and number 11, and really the change being illustrated here with this submission is the addition of a small piece of property that was previously part of the first buildable lot at the eastern end of Woodfield Drive and the western termination of Woodfield Drive, and reallocating that property to Tract C, as it's depicted, which is the space between the rear yards of the homes that back up to 2440 Highway. This was an aim by the developer to fully control property to enable them to have access for mowing regularly, tree planting, tree maintenance, just general access. As you'll note, if you've been by that site, there's quite a bit of elevation change from the highway, so entrance off the highway is not an option. They did have utility easements that would permit them access previously in the earlier plats, but they requested revision of the Tract C to allow that access to be unencumbered and clear to any home buyer and down the road at either of those two lots that are impacted. Again, no lot dimensions or setbacks, side setbacks in this case, are negatively impacted by this change. So staff had no comment to oppose the request and seemed to make sense. Again, Planning Commission unanimously approved, and we'd be happy to stand for any questions you have, but do request separate motions for the two items.
Okay. Any questions about the two items? Okay. Seeing none, I would accept a motion for Stone Creek Edition number 12.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to accept the dedication of land for public purposes as part of the replat for Stone Creek Edition number 12.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. Ms. Huntington, will you call the roll for the vote, please?
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Partridge?
Aye.
Ms. Stevens?
Aye.
And Mr. Dale?
Aye.
Thank you. I'd accept a similar motion for number 13.
I'll move to accept the dedication of land for public purposes as part of the replat for Stone Creek Edition number 13.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Oh, I'm sorry, I should do a roll call vote on that. I apologize.
Or you can ask if anybody's abstaining, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what the results were. Okay,
Okay, yeah.
all right. Just so it's clear that Mr. Donnelly is not involved in any way. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Item C on the agenda is Resolution 11-2401. Consider approval of a proposed City of Tonganoxie fund balance policy. Mr. Brockovich.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. As you probably recall, staff made a larger presentation on this during our October 21st meeting. We took a look at prior practice where the city had established goals but never formally established a policy. We looked at potential funds that would be impacted with specific discussion about the general fund and then utility funds, because those were the three funds that we were actively practicing meeting goals. Through that discussion, we decided, or you folks directed us to come back with a policy on the general fund in particular. And so that's what we're advancing this evening. The staff recommendation on that is to establish a 30% fund balance policy for general fund. For a variety of reasons that we, like I said, talked about last time. But I think one of the big issues that really resonated was when we took a look at the volatility of the revenue that comes in and how that impacts general fund. We saw that we were barely at 60% of that revenue to be considered somewhat stable, either highly stable or relatively stable. And so when you think about the flexibility that comes with general fund and what we use that for on an annual basis for budget establishment, I think it warrants a 30%. It's not out of line with what other communities are doing. In fact, we would be kind of middle of the road or even trending towards the lower end of that. But we tried to also be cognizant of the fact that providing taxpayer relief is also an important policy that you folks have set over the years, and so we feel 30% would adequately suffice to cover the city's needs at this time. We are not advancing policy discussion for the utility funds, but just would remind everybody, well, at this time, unless you folks want to do that, but the utility fund balance goals are also 30%. So it kind of keeps it steady across the board, both from the general fund and then the water and sewer funds. Would be happy to answer any additional questions you might have. The policy itself is in the agenda packet. We try to keep it fairly brief. We wanted to identify the flexibility in the plan, both if we're exceeding fund balance as well as if we're not quite meeting that. And ultimately, to, I guess, summarize it the best way I can, we come back to you as a governing body that makes policy level decisions on how we would address either of those circumstances. So with that, Mayor, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sure. I thought it was well done, clear and concise and plain, and I really appreciate your work. Anybody else have any questions or comments about it?
Yes, I'll make a comment. I'm going to oppose this one. I think the city of Tonganoxie has been here a lot longer than all of us and will remain long after any of us have served on this board. I think the only thing this resolution really does is put an unnecessary and artificial restriction on the use of our best judgment throughout the budgetary process to come up with a budget that meets the best needs of the community. That isn't that I disagree with any of the goals of the intended resolution, but I just don't think it accomplishes anything tangible, and it only really serves as an impediment. So, and I thought about this a little bit. I think the argument that we can always change the number is not a reason to vote in favor of the resolution. It just doesn't provide me enough justification to. Again, I think we're doubling the reserve that we're well over anyway, and again, I think I've said everything I feel, and I just don't think it's necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. Anyone else?
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No, yeah, I'll make a general comment on that. Thank you, George, for putting it all together, and I think it gives a couple groups of people, first of our bonding groups, they understand where we're at and that we have a goal and a target, and it's clear, and it also gives our taxpayers an idea of where we're going to try to land at. And the only suggestion that I would add is that you have a minimum balance, which is described, but the maximum balance, there's not a maximum balance. But we, in your comments on the, if it's exceeded, that we could spend the excess, it doesn't say anything. I think it should also suggest that we could also lower mill levy to make the ending balance of the budget hit that target. Don't have to do it, but it tells the taxpayers we can do it, and we may not. We have to do that anyways in the state's requirements to hit specific budgeting, public hearings and different things, and we have to be out and present that to the public, and the reason for that is to tell the public what we wanted to do, and this is just making it more clear, so.
Yeah, in my takeaways from discussing this with George is that once we have that 30% reserve, once we meet that goal, then we can take that excess money and decide where to best incorporate that back into the budget. I mean, that's my understanding of this. So whether it is a long sought after project or debt relief or lowering the mill levy, et cetera, then we'll know that we're hitting this, which we, in practicality, we are already, and it's more in line with other communities. And for our bond rating, it will help too, because it will say, this is what we say we're gonna do and this is what we're doing. Knowing though, once we have that, we can rest assured that we have a rainy day fund. You know, I know that's not the appropriate, but I'm thinking about a personal household budget. Once we have money saved and set back, okay, now we know what we can do with this extra. If we are reserving that, you're right, we don't want to withhold it when the citizens, you know, would be asking for additional things. But I think it's pretty clear, and after having that discussion, I have a better understanding that this makes sense for a city of our size and with our budget to have something like this in place.
I have a quick question. Has this affected our bonds in any way? Have we had trouble issuing bonds?
It's come up in the past when we go to issue debt. We do the bond rating review calls, and both of the bigger agencies will ask if there's a fund balance policy. So we already get dinged a little bit because it's not a formal policy; it's just a goal. But everything's to scale, and so even 30% for us is pretty minimal when you compare us to other communities that have 50 times the annual budget and revenue that we do. However, it does show, it is viewed favorably if you have a formal fund balance policy, especially for general fund, and if you can show performance that you've met that goal over the years.
All right, well, fine, I'll support it then. But to speak to your point, Mr. Donnelly, there's no city that has a maximum, and I don't think that the city staff is recommending a maximum. And again, all of this is, if you want the budget to reflect a 30% revenue, let's work to make a budget next year that has a 30% revenue or reserve ratio there. I mean, so anyway, but if it helps us to get bonds easier, then I'll support it, because I'm not going to deny it for ideological purposes only. But I just remember my first time coming to one of these when I was getting sworn in. You guys were talking about this, and I remember hearing you talk about it, and I thought to myself, he is asking this because he thinks we have too much in reserves. And I still, maybe I'm reading the tea leaves wrong, I still think ultimately you think our reserves are a little too high. And I just don't understand. And forgive me, I'm newer than you, a lot newer. But if that's the case, why not just propose in the budget, let's have less in reserves? You know?
It's a combination of a lot of things, and one of them is, what is the goal to hit? We could have 10,000 times more in tech and not need it for 10 years. Why keep it? It's not our money.
I agree.
That's one thing, but the bonding issue, you weren't here in 2005, 2004, go back and look at those, and we were not financially successful. And we were asked multiple times, and it's not George or Dan, neither one of them were here, what are you doing? And we had to fix things. So there's a reason to have reserves. And there's also a reason to tell the public what our goals are and make them clear and not hide from the public what we are expecting staff and to direct their finances. It's their money, it's not ours. As soon as we start thinking it's our money, that becomes a problem, in my mind. Not necessarily in your mind, but in my mind.
No, I agree with you, of course. That's why I want more flexibility, because there are 1,000 variables that are unique not only to Tonganoxie, but unique to the macro environmental circumstances at the time. Inflation, our real estate market, all these different factors. Maybe the right number one year is 28%, it's 32. Again, I think 30 is a fine number. I don't think it's unreasonable, and I think it makes a lot of sense. It's good to have reserves. I don't think anyone would argue against a rainy day fund. The only thing I really question is trying to create this artificial plateau where it's, okay, minimum 30, maximum something just under 30 every year, where that really basically you're taking the tools of budgeting out of the hands of the city council and just making it a mathematical equation that I think. Well, first of all, I don't think that's not what this resolution is. It doesn't establish a maximum at any kind of real capacity. But something like that does kind of give me those concerns, because I think, that's our whole point of existence, right? Is representatives to determine how to best use the money. Again, I think a minimum makes a lot of sense for all the reasons listed. So, but I agree with you on. It's certainly not our money. I think in my time here, I think that we've done a real good job of being cognizant of that. We've seen the mill levy go down 4 mills last year and stay flat this year. So I think everyone's conscious of that. So anyway, that's it.
And thanks to staff for your work on this after asking for it and talking about it for years. I mean, you all really came through and put something together that's reasonable. You all already have very full plates.
Mr. Dale, did you have anything?
You know, I appreciate all of the comments and and thoughts on the matter. I kind of fall right in the middle where I see some benefit, but I also see it as kind of optics. So that's I appreciate hearing all sides.
I definitely agree on the optics side. I think transparency is a great thing. And having that there is a great transparency tool for the public. Okay. Any further questions? Did we want to amend the language on the spend the excess reserves?
I might add one comment on that point. Scanning the policy, I think the best place to insert acceptable use of reserve, including property tax rate adjustments, would be the last paragraph of page 1, where there's sort of a laundry list already assigned in a sentence. It starts with requirements can include but is not limited to, and that could be an addition if that's the will of the council in the motion. We can easily add that edit.
Okay, let's do that. Okay. Is there a motion at this time?
You want to make that without, or would you rather wait to see it drafted in, or?
We can,
I mean, it's up.
I can make it and try to add in what y'all think. Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to pass Resolution 112401 to approve the City of Tonganoxie fund balance policy with the addition of under acceptable, sorry, I'm pulling that up now, going from paper. Acceptable uses of reserves to include reduction of mill levy when approved by City Council.
all right. Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Ms. Huntington, would you call a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Partridge?
Aye.
Ms. Stevens?
Aye.
Mr. Donnelly?
Aye.
Mr. Dale?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thanks for the great conversation. Moving on to the city manager agenda, the October 2024 financial report.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll kick it off here. Our financial report shows the results of the city's financial activities through the end of the month of October. One thing that we're excited to report is that following this report, but early in November, we did complete our last pay application to Caldwell Tank for the water tower project. So we do anticipate, we hope at least, with the help of our grant administrator, that our final EDA grant closeout and remittance of funds should come in, we believe, late in November, very early in December. So we're very thrilled that that project, which wrapped up last fall, can now close out the financial books on it and close up the books on the grant, and also prepare us in the spring for the temp note debt repayment with the full available funds that we anticipated from the grant proceeds. So that's very outstanding news, and we're thrilled at that progress. With a couple things on the notes of budget adjustments. We made 2 in early January this year in the Police Capital Fund. We also are including a public notice in the newspaper for the General Fund, the Capital Projects Fund, and the Special Highway Fund. And I'll give a little more background on that next meeting on December 2nd when we hold a public hearing and consider those budget amendments. But just for some clarification, 2 of those edits are for transparency purposes to show, although our expenditure authority does not change, where we anticipated spending money and how much is going to change, and we'll detail what that is in preparation of documents for that agenda packet and in the presentation next meeting. The other fund, though, with expenditure authority increase is the Special Highway Fund, and that's just to give us a comfortable margin of error should we need to make an additional purchase before the year end in commodities that we buy with that funding source. So expect a much more detailed summary than that at the next meeting, but just for your awareness, that is noticed for the December 2nd council meeting date. The highlight this month is the return of sales tax after the late remittance in early October of the September proceeds and the on-time remittance of October proceeds near the end of the month. The state's on their game, which we're glad to see nearing year end. Our progress compared to budget is still relatively similar. So in the general fund and the infrastructure sales tax fund, which are city receipts, we're down 7% from budget projections. However, last year we were expecting some small amount of increase this year, so we're only down 4.4% from the prior year. That equates to about a $66,000 difference on an annual basis, and in a $4.5 million general fund and in a nearly $2 million infrastructure sales tax fund, that's really not a tremendous negative impact, but it is something that we're fortunate we saw early enough this year that we don't think our 2025 budget projections are too far off at this point. So we'll continue to monitor that. We'll also, near year end, have a better update on sales tax because we anticipate that some of the construction activity that you might have noticed in the community with a lot of materials delivered on site could cause a slight uptick from where we were. And we're hoping that that allows us to close year end a little nearer to our budget projections than we are right now. In the capital projects fund, which is the county sales tax, we're at 4.4% less than budget. And I apologize, there is a typo. From the prior year, we are only down 2.4%. So again, better performance relative to last year than to our budget projection. Later in the report, again, the revenue and expenditure summary by subcategory is also highlighted. I don't have anything major to note in those areas, but again, wanted to note that we'll come back with more detail on sales tax near year end, and obviously the budget adjustments to be considered next meeting. But are there any questions from the council or areas of interest you'd like to see highlighted at our year-end reports the next 2 months that we work up?
Anything you'd like to add, council?
Nope, thank you again. It's very helpful.
Great.
Got a quick question on the water tower and our contractors. Do you expect that will be a conclusion of that transaction, or are they gonna bug us for any damages, or are we gonna bug them? Are they gonna go away?
That's a great question. We're going to remain optimistic that as we were completing our 1-year follow-up inspections, and that's when we were closing out a year's worth of conversations with them about that we've all come to this common place with a final pay app that everyone was in agreement with.
Good.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Porter. Anything else in the city manager's report?
Oh yeah, mayor's tree lighting. I don't know if you're going to bring that up on yours. That's coming up, so I'll leave you the honors on that, though.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I need to go back to the agenda. City attorney agenda?
There were no items on that
Okay,
this
great.
evening.
Mayor Pro Tem agenda?
No items this evening, thank you.
Thank you. City council agenda? Anybody have anything?
Yeah, I will congratulate the Tonganoxie High School football team and its coach, Troyer, for its return to the state semifinals this Friday against Bishop Miege, and encourage anyone and everyone to go out for what should be a beautiful evening for football, dry, crisp, and clear. And I was out there on Friday, and the vending options have improved with every season, and you can now get 2 different kinds of hot chocolate, and your local football team and a hot chocolate on a cool Friday night. If that isn't small town living, I don't know what is. So I encourage anyone and everyone to get out there on Friday to support the team.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Partridge. Anyone else?
One question, is there any public update on our annexation issue with the county? I know Anna was gonna work on some things, but
Yes.
she's not here. Is there anything you can do publicly that we can?
I believe dockets are public, and there's a bench trial in district court set for December 8th. So we're hoping to hear the court's opinion on that.
Do you plan on attending?
In discussion with the attorneys, I guess the request was that we would just make it an attorney discussion. However, we have asked our attorneys, seeing that the county's attorneys are county employees, it would be nice to have the option to participate at some level, even if we're just there for appearance and to hear firsthand. So we're working through the logistics.
Highly recommend you doing that.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, George.
Yep.
Okay. On the mayor agenda, I need to approve a couple of planning commissioners, John Kirk and Patty Bitler, for 2 more 3-year terms. I'd like the council's consent on that. If you're all in favor of that, could you say aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. And then I also need to appoint a new library board member, Sarah Moore. She's a teacher at the middle school and a published author, and the board is excited about having her on board, and I'd like your consent with that as well. If you could signify approval by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone?
Does she live in the city limits? or-
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a city one.
Taken out, and I don't.
Yeah. Anybody opposed? Okay. Mayor's tree lighting is this Saturday at 5 o'clock. I'm supposed to be there at 4:40. That's what, at the parade.
Parade at
start-
5,
Thank you.
lighting at 6.
All right, sounds great.
No promises on the weather, but we hope it's as nice as Friday.
It should be dry.
The football team will be in the parade, so come stay tuned for that. It'll either be great or okay.
That'll be great for them either way. Awesome. I have nothing more, so I would be entertain a motion to adjourn, Jake.
I motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. Thank you, Mr. Partridge. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. See you in a couple weeks. Thank you.